Hello everyone. Our presentation is today about is Theranos, which is what was the innovation, what happened when there was a deception, and what is the professional responsibility. And we'll talk about how this implies on utilitarian and deontology and ACS frameworks. So this presentation today and the report that we made actually critically analyzes the Theranos case from the perspective of professional and business ethics. Theranos was once presented as the most innovative healthcare technology in the healthcare sector, wherein they claimed that the one drop of blood uh, would kind of solve 240 plus tests, which was again and very exaggerated claim in today's medical science. These extraordinary claims were made during the launch of the Theranos, which had serious problems that involved deception, that also risked patient safety, that had issues with investor trust and responsibility as the professional. In this presentation today, we will examine what went wrong, and we will apply different ethical theories and the Australian uh, society to understand what were the wider implications. So, in the next slide, what actually happened at Theranos? So, as you all know, that Theranos was founded by Elizabeth Holmes in 2003 with a promise that they would transform blood testing and they would provide cheaper alternatives to the blood testing, wherein they claimed that in one single finger prick, with one drop of blood, they could perform 240 plus tests that could be done from a single drop of blood. By With these kind of extraordinary claims made by Theranos, it was noticeable that it reached a reported valuation of $9 billion at that point of time, because it attracted a lot of investments. It had a media publicity with these kind of exaggerated claims made by the company, and the company therefore landed attracting $9 billion of investments. Then, when these kind of claims were verified and by the regulatory bodies, there were major limitations were found, and they found that they did not have their own technology. They were using any conventional laboratory machines to perform their tests. So as you can see on the right hand side in the two boxes, these are the highlights, which was one, that the claim that said that from a one finger prick they could perform 240 plus tests, hence providing a cheaper alternative to conventional blood testing. So, and it therefore attracted $9 billion dollars of valuation. So let's talk about the innovation was good. They had good innovation. What was the problem here? Why there was an issue? So when the regulatory bodies then when they investigated, there were multiple issues that were found, that they used conventional machinery, conventional laboratories to do the testing. Now, what happened was this actually um, had a core ethical failure, because what was promised was never delivered, and it was not based on any kind of evidence. It was just an extraordinary exaggerated claims made by Theranos. So here we see that there was an ethical failure by Theranos. So the first point that was that the patients, the doctors, and the investors could not independently verify the proprietary technology. Although they claimed that they had their own technology wherein they could do the testing by a single drop of blood, but there was no verifiable evidence by any of these stakeholders, be it patients, be it doctors, or be it investors, that could actually independently verify whether the claims made by Theranos were verifiable and were producing results that can be traced back. Now, second failure that happened was like the secrecy and pressure on employees that weakened internal challenge and scientific scrutiny. So the employees were organizationally targeted and were under an organizational pressure to hide the gray areas of the Theranos, and there was a pressure on employees that actually kind of weakened the internal company working, and there was no scientific scrutiny done on Theranos claims. So, so there was secrecy, and then there was problem with the whistleblowers. Whistleblowers were the employees, and they had to face a lot of pressure within the company. Then the third point that needs to be highlighted, that the leadership also continued promoting uh, that the results that were there, they were very certain that these results were right, despite there was unresolved reliability concerns. That means there was no reliable result because it was not it was not open to any kind of scientific scrutiny, and the results were not traceable. So, but the leadership again continued to promoting these as a very certain, verifiable results. And so, if, if you see the bottom line, basically, the bottom line is the ethical issue was there is, even though they failed the technology, even they had a failed technology, which was not an issue, but the problem that it was an unproven system, and they represented it as a proven system. They claimed that it had a lot of verifiable result, was not ethical. So, if you talk about in terms of innovation, multiple technologies come in every now and then. Even in today's modern world, if we see, most technologies roll out every day. But few technologies fail, few technologies do pass, but they have certain limitations. But if you say that if you roll out a particular technology and you hide the limitations and you do not open it to public scrutiny, and you claim that this technology is universal and can solve all the problems without any proven track record, this raises a serious ethical concern. That is what happened here, which was the uh, core ethical failure. So now let's see what were the implications on what were the different kind of implications, and the different ethical theories that imply on this Theranos technology scam. So, so first we see that the results were very unreliable, and these kind of unreliable results actually had false reassurances of the patient. Let's suppose if a patient is suffering from a terminal disease, and they did the testing and they found that everything was okay. So the the patient uh, was assured that he was okay, and it embarred him from getting the right treatment. Now, if you see, if a patient is having terminal illness, and by this result he is assured that he is okay, probably he might have serious health implications, and he might also lose his life. So these were the ethical health implications that patients had. So that created false reassurances, uh, anxiety, and then there was repeated testing and there was inappropriate treatment. Let's suppose if a person is suffering from particular disease and he is diagnosed with any kind of other disease, the treatment line would change and he would receive an inappropriate treatment rather than having the correct treatment. Now, if you see the utilitarianism principle, we see that there was very much the foreseeable harm that patient occurred was very much foreseeable. It had major impact on patient's diagnosis, and this was a very much foreseeable patient harm that was done to the patient. And this entire health implication that patients had actually outweighed speculative future benefits. It so utilitarianism also failed here because we cannot risk uh, patients' health with incorrect diagnosis. So then, if we talk about deontology, then so the leaders of the Theranos had the duties of the truthfulness. So even though they lacked the technology, even though failed the technology, they should be truthful, and they should do informed decision making. If they come up with a technology that they were not very sure of, they should have informed the particular stakeholders, and they should inform the limitations. They should define the scope, and they should also rolled out the guidelines for the harm prevention. So, and if we talk about the virtue ethics, the honesty, humility, and courage were also replaced by hubris and resistance to criticism, which is again very cowardly. If you go on the lines of virtue ethics, you should be honest, you should be humble, and you should have the courage to speak the truth, even your technology has failed. But here in this case, it was replaced by exaggeration, it was replaced by unseen certainty. They were very certain that their solutions would work, wherein it didn't. So it was replaced by the noise, the exaggeration, and they were very resistant to criticism. So whosoever was acting as a whistleblower or was criticizing, they were very resistant to it. And the leaders, of course, they continued making bigger claims. Then, if we talk about economic and legal implication here, they informed people who were stakeholders. They misled the information and they distorted the investors' decision and contributed to major financial loss. Now, multiple stakeholders they went on the company claims. They did not went deep to research as to what were the outcomes, foreseeable outcomes, what were the results that patients were having. They did not see the results. They did not had any kind of evidences, but they invested on the claims that were given by Theranos. So it had a major economic fallout for the investors because they had major implications, economic implications by investing into Theranos because it ultimately turned out to be a failure. So there was a, and this all happened because there was a misleading information that distorted investors' decisions, and which eventually contributed to major financial losses. Uh, so stakeholder theory also shows that patients, employees, and investors were sidelined in favor of valuation and growth. So now investors went on the company claims and they saw evaluation and growth and the technological prospects that the company was offering without keeping into consideration real patients data, real patients evidence, employees feedback, and investors. So again, these all were sidelined, and it resulted to a catastrophic uh, effect in the economic framework of Theranos. So the SEC also charged Theranos, Holmes and Balwani with massive fraud in 2018. So the key lesson here is legality is just a baseline. So professional ethics must guide conduct before regulators intervene. Even though there was a law, there was regulation that came in that identified the gray areas and that identified the technology did not work. But we need to see above legality. Legal issues happen later on, but the professional ethics should be in place right from the day one. Because if they saw that there were limitations, if there were problems and they were using conventional laboratory methods, they shouldn't have made exaggerated claims. So the key lesson here is the professional ethics must be imbibed from the scratch. So let's talk about what were the impacts that happened on the society. First of all, with the uh, hyper claims that Theranos made, and later on when the balloon was busted, the public trust for the healthcare innovations and for the healthcare technologies actually weakened, uh, especially in newer innovations, particular concerning the diagnosis. So this was weakened, and this was a major societal implications of the Theranos saga. So it had a weakened public trust. The it also exposed the risk uh, if we worship the founder, if we go by word of what the founders and what the leaders are saying, and there was a fear of missing out, and the company board also lacked relevant scientific expertise. So this case, Theranos scam, also exposed these factors, like they thought that they were missing out on something very much innovative, and they didn't have any kind of scientific expertise. So this case, uh, kind of played with the trust and transparency of the public. It also surpassed safety criticism, reducing the protective role of the whistleblowers. So the whistleblowers in this case were the employees, although they raised the criticism, but these whistleblowers were suppressed and they faced resistance within the company. So there was also a societal impact, that the people who said the truth and they were criticizing for a very valid cause were being suppressed. Then this technology that came in had a very high risk because it required evidences and transparency proportionate to its potential harm. So it also had this problem, wherein the the this technology, which was concerned to healthcare, ha- required uh, required a lot of transparency and evidence. But here, if you see, there was no transparency, there was no clinical evidence, there was no studies done, and it ultimately busted the uh, ultimately had issues on the public, that that had major trust issues on the healthcare innovations. Now, if you talk about ACS code and recommendation, Australian Computer Society principles of honesty, trustworthiness, and respect provide a relevant benchmark. But all these three principles were breached in this Theranos case. If we talk about honesty, trustworthiness, respect. Uh, the honesty was violated because there was no validation from the patient use. There was no publication of meaningful methods and what limitations were there. Uh, there were no independent validations on that. So the honesty principles was again um, was honesty was again ruled out. If we talk about second principle, which was the trustworthiness, so uh, so people should trust the system, that they need to know that if they criticize the system, if they criticize the system, they won't be subjected to any kind of aftermath. So safe criticism is very necessary so that we have a trust into the organization and people can trust the organization and its employees. So you see that the trustworthiness was also at stake when when the employees were subjugated and they were suppressed within the system uh, for raising safety concerns and criticism. Then, if you talk about respect, that the, this principle was also ruled out because apparently Theranos never respected stakeholders' trust. Even though they had an exaggerated claim, the claims that uh, they made a marketing claims that weren't traceable to any kind of evidence, and they did not informed any kind of limitations to the stakeholders. This also again, so this also violates the respect principles if you talk about the ACS framework. So the Theranos saga. We see that how it uh, crossed the borderline of what ACS principles uh, say. So the both three principles, honesty, trustworthiness, and respect, were being suppressed, were being subjugated, and were never there in place with the Theranos. So to conclude, the Theranos, we should not view Theranos as uh, innovative startup whose technology failed, because technologies can roll out every single day and technologies may work or may not work. So this Theranos should not be viewed as an startup which had a technological failure. In fact, we should see that the fundamental problem was the ethics and was with the leaders who continued making claims that exceeded the available evidence, while patients, clinicians, and investors relied on those claims. So even though there was no verifiable evidence, there were no traceable patient output, yet they relied on these. All the stakeholders relied on these marketing claims, and we also saw that utilitarianism, deontology, virtue ethics, stakeholder theory, and ACS code ultimately led to similar conclusions. All these theories come to a single conclusion, that even though you have an innovation, but that cannot override truthfulness, which cannot override competence, respect, and responsibility to prevent the harm. So the main lesson we need to learn from Theranos is that genuine innovation requires not only technological ambition, it also requires evidence, transparency, and professional accountability. So this is what we have learned. So thank you so much. The conclusion is very much evident. We need to learn from Theranos. We need to imply um, we need to imply this into today's modern startups, that professional ethics is very much important.